Hello there, and welcome to another episode of the King's Square Reviews. My next review covers Daredevil Born Again, Episode 3, titled The Hollow of His Hand. The trial of Hector Ayala, aka White Tiger, takes up the majority of this episode, with a shocking ending that sets the stage for the next story arc. This will be a spoiler-heavy analysis of the episode, so stop listening to this if you haven't watched The Hollow of His Hand. Before getting into the review, let me get some shameless self-promotion out of the way. If you're enjoying my recaps, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button and click the bell icon to get notified when new videos drop. You can also get early access to videos like this one, as well as exclusives, by signing up for my Patreon. The link for that is on the link tree in the description below. Thanks for your patience, and on with the recap. One of the things I enjoyed most about this episode is that it gave Camar de los Reyes a chance to shine as Hector Ayala. We didn't get to see much of him in the previous episode, but we start off The Hollow of His Hand with a short monologue by Hector. His description of his home in Puerto Rico has such loving details, including the sound of the coquis, tree frogs that sing at night. For the briefest of moments, Hector is no longer sitting in the holding cell waiting for the trial to begin. He's back home, and all of these troubles are far behind him. It's a wonderful scene, and Camar used such subtlety in his performance that I couldn't help but feel for the character. As I admitted in one of my previous reviews for this show, I was not familiar with White Tiger before Daredevil Born Again. A little did I know that the trial of White Tiger is an arc from the Daredevil comics, one that plays out much differently than it does here in the show. In the comics, Hector Ayala is completely framed by the NYPD, and his trial is little better than a kangaroo court, despite the best attempts of Foggy and Matt to acquit him. The trial ends tragically when, after receiving a guilty verdict, Hector assaults a bailiff and tries to escape with the bailiff's firearm. Hector is met outside by both the public and the NYPD, who gun down White Tiger with no remorse. The trial of White Tiger in the show has some similar ups and downs, but a completely different result. I'm pretty good at picking up on story beats at this point in my life, but there were some curveballs I was not expecting in this episode. Hochberg, the district attorney for New York, questions Powell on the witness stand. Powell is clearly worse for wear after his encounter with Matt in the previous episode, which Matt uses to secretly mess with Powell on cross-examination. Hochberg and Powell spin a story about Shanahan, the cop that died on the subway platform, making the pair seem like honest, decent public servants. Nothing could be further from the truth, of course. Matt tries and successfully gets Powell to perjure himself on the stand when Powell states he doesn't know any Nicky Torres. We then see another cop in the court's gallery with a Punisher tattoo on his neck who whispers that they need to find and stop Nicky Torres from testifying. And that's where the first curveball comes into play. Cherry is seen somewhere else in the city delivering a small packet of drugs to Nicky Torres at a hideout. The fact that the hideout has a Punisher logo on it with the word "triggered" emblazoned shows that subtlety is not going to be this show's strong suit at times. The fact that Torres is a drug addict automatically made me worried as a viewer. Any decent attorney would shred him to pieces on the stand, making him an unreliable witness. But he's the best option Murdoch and McDuffie have, so Cherry's going to get him to court. When Cherry, his associate, and Torres leaves, we can see someone is watching the group. We then see Cherry rushing through New York traffic in a van, trying to stay one step ahead of any cops who could be on the prowl, but his luck runs dry. Powell and a motorcycle cop pull over the van and direct Cherry to open the back, revealing no one is in the van at all. At the same moment of the reveal, Torres and the associate that traveled with him step out of a yellow cab outside the courthouse. This is a wonderful little subversion, and one I felt was quite ingenious. No one would even think to look for Torres in such a public vehicle, which is why Cherry's ruse works so well. Unfortunately, it's all for naught. Facing a room full of clearly pissed off cops, Torres folds on the witness stand, refusing to admit he was in the subway station or his connection to Powell and Shanahan. For now, it appears that the Hector Ayala defense is down for the count. Later that evening, McDuffie, Cherry, and Matt all agree that Torres' testimony was the key to their defense. Without it, they know they don't have much of a chance of winning the case. Meanwhile, trouble is brewing in the world of Mayor Fisk. One of the crime syndicates, the Irish mob from the sound of their accents, knock over a drop-off exchange of another gang in the Kingpin Syndicate. Without a strong central leader calling the shots, factions will form to determine who will be the top dog. Vanessa points this out to Fisk over breakfast the following morning, which Fisk dismisses as being beneath them. We cut to Wilson's knuckles, which show clear signs of abuse. For all of this talk of letting his violent nature go, Wilson is clearly beating the hell out of someone on the regular. To answer this rising threat, Vanessa sends Wilson's bodyguard, who it appears works for her as well, to settle the blood debt between the rival gangs. The Irish gang is definitely not happy about the arrangement, especially given the price tag, which I assume is $1.8 million. Wilson later calls her out on this behavior before their next therapy session with Dr. Glenn. The audacity of Wilson telling his wife not to go to a place where he can't trust her is extreme. When Vanessa mentions Adam, her former lover again, you can see Wilson wince a little at the mention. I have a feeling Adam is the reason Wilson's knuckles have been so torn up. He did promise Vanessa that he wouldn't kill Adam. He never said anything about not kicking Adam's ass thoroughly. The devil, as they say, is in the details. Speaking of the devil, the trial of Hector Ayala takes a sudden and frankly hypocritical turn when Matt puts Hector on the stand. As Matt's examination continues, you can see him building to something, but it's also clear Hector has no idea what's about to happen. Matt then plays his ace in the hole, producing Hector's white tiger mask and revealing Hector's superhero identity. It's a bold move, but one I feel is deeply flawed on Matt's part. The judge for the case rightly calls Matt out on his hypocrisy, since it was Matt's argument in chambers that compelled the judge to suppress Hector's superhero identity from evidence. Matt's decision to use White Tiger is a calculated bit of theater, meant to expose the character of Hector Ayala to avert a murder charge. I get why Matt does this. Matt's first duty as an attorney is to win the case for his client and keep him out of jail. But this crosses a line for me. Hector calls Matt out on it in the holding cell, rightfully pointing out that this wasn't Matt's secret to tell, and it truly wasn't up to Matt to make that decision unilaterally. I'm not sure of the continuity here, but this is the same Matt Murdock who argued for protecting the privacy of costume superheroes in She-Hulk. I could see in Hector's face that he wanted nothing to do with Matt after that, but I think he also understood that the dam had already broke. I also want to point out the difference between Matt and Hector here as far as their vigilante careers are concerned. Matt gave up being Daredevil after the death of Foggy, his lowest point as a person. But prior to that, Matt's pursuits as Daredevil were less about justice and more about delivering retribution. As evidenced by the people who come to court to testify on his behalf and the police reports Matt presents to the court, Hector's career as White Tiger was predicated on one principle: doing the right thing for his community. He says it over and over again under questioning from Matt. Helping people in tight spots, including police officers, was the right thing to do. While both men help people, there's a selflessness to Hector's pursuits, at least in the show, that make him all the more endearing to me as a viewer. Matt's reveal works, though. Even with Hochberg's incendiary closing argument, including the graphic demise Detective Shanahan experienced, isn't enough to sway the jury that someone of Hector's character would do what he was accused of doing. Hochberg has been embarrassed, which, if he comes back into the story, will make him an embittered opponent against Matt in the future. Hector gets a chance to celebrate with his family, and despite no longer having a secret identity, he thanks Matt for getting him acquitted. The acquittal stings Wilson Fisk's ego, particularly given his New Year's Eve speech condemning vigilantes. He decides to use B.B. Urich's podcast to express his dissatisfaction, calling the verdict a miscarriage of justice, which is usually used when the verdict is guilty and the defendant is clearly innocent. B.B. rightly calls Wilson out on that statement, which causes Wilson to pivot to stating that juries get cases wrong, as he's been party to in the past. It's a piece of political theater, one born from Fisk's deep hatred of Matt and the meddling of other vigilantes. But that brings us to the ending of the episode and the absolute gut punch that it is. As Fisk is giving his views to BB, we see Hector in his home putting on his White Tiger costume. Matt encouraged Hector to give up being White Tiger, clearly projecting his own idea that he doesn't want to be Daredevil, which couldn't be further from the truth, onto Hector. In return, Hector said what should have been obvious to Matt from the start. Being White Tiger wasn't a job, it was a calling. Helping people in their most vulnerable moments is a true calling, one Matt has abandoned for legitimately personal reasons. It shouldn't be a surprise, though, that even with his identity now known to the New York City public, Hector still decides to put on his suit and medallion and go out and help people. And that's when someone comes out of the shadows and shoots Hector Ayala in the head, killing him instantly. The hooded figure is wearing a tactical vest with the Punisher logo printed on it. This is one of the cops from the courtroom, possibly Powell or the cop with the neck tattoo. Frank would never have gone after Hector Ayala, largely on shared principles. If anything, I would say Frank Castle would have respected the hell out of Ayala, especially given Hector's military background. For all of his theatrics in court, Matt's victory is a hollow one as Hector dies on the NYC streets. It's a fantastic episode of TV, one that I thoroughly enjoyed, even with the downer ending. Hector's time on the show was too brief. I would have loved to have seen the character continue to appear, possibly to team up with Matt at some point. The director of the episode has gone on record stating that no one knew Camar de los Reyes was dealing with cancer while filming was occurring, but all of his scenes were shot long before he passed away in 2023. Camar de los Reyes brought a wonderful humanity to Hector Ayala through these two episodes. I cannot say enough good things about his performance. On that note, this marks the end of my recap for Daredevil Born Again Episode 3. Once again, if you enjoyed this recap, hit that like button and then the subscribe button. And if you want to show your support, consider signing up for my Patreon. Thank you and have a wonderful day.